When I opened my mom's old trunk, the room filled with the smell of dust, vanilla, and thyme. It was the scent of childhood, of waking up to the sound of rain and hearing my mother quietly humming in the kitchen. Now silence, only the clock ticking, as if reminding me, it's time to let go. I went through the things methodically. Letters, books, magazine clippings. With every bundle, it got harder to breathe, like the dust was settling right on my heart. And then, between the pages of an old photo album, I found it. A black and white photo, a young man around 20, with a slightly tilted gaze that seemed to look right into your soul. On the back, a short inscription in elegant handwriting. To my love as a reminder. David. I had never heard of him. And my mom, it seemed, didn't have any secrets. At least that's what I thought. I looked at the photo for a long time. There was something strangely familiar about his features. The line of his jaw, the gaze, even the smile. And then it hit me like a ton of bricks. This guy looked like Liam, my acquaintance from college. The same Liam with whom everything was almost but not quite. We were both young, stubborn, and terrible at talking about our feelings back then. When I transferred to a different university, we didn't even say goodbye. It just ended. No explanation. And now I look at the photo and I see his face. Younger from the past, but still him. Of course, it was impossible, but my heart still told me I had to find out. I didn't find Liam's address right away through mutual friends, a little on social media, a little by intuition. His profile was empty. No photos, just a brief. Lives in Portland. I drove there on Saturday. Autumn was at its peak. Red and amber maples shedding leaves like torn-up letters from the past. The house stood on a hill next to an old oak tree, a white fence, a bicycle by the porch. Everything looked too familiar. When the door opened, I saw him. Liam, a little older with a beard, wearing a coffee-colored sweater. But the eyes were the same, deep, attentive, as if they could read minds. Sophia, he said quietly, surprised, almost a whisper. Hi! I smiled uncertainly. Long time no see. He stood there as if he didn't believe it. You look different. Mom passed away. The words just slipped out. I was going through her things and I found this. I handed him the photo. His hand barely brushed mine. Briefly, but enough for that old feeling to return. Liam looked at the picture. His face was calm at first, but then it changed. Surprise, confusion, then something deeper, almost painful. This is my father, he whispered. Silence hung between us, thick as the leaves falling into puddles. Your father, I repeated. Yeah, David Harper. He's lived here his whole life. But why would your mom have a photo of him? I didn't have an answer. I just stood there with a photograph that had suddenly turned into the key to a story neither of us knew. Come on, Liam said after a minute of silence. My dad lives nearby. I want to show him this. We drove in silence. Trees flashed past the window like old reels of memories. We haven't seen each other in a long time, he said suddenly. 8 years, I replied. I thought you had forgotten. No, I admitted life just got in the way. His fingers tightened on the steering wheel, and something I couldn't quite catch flickered in the corners of his eyes. His father's house stood by the lake, old wooden, with a porch and a rocking chair. The door was opened by an older man with gray hair and a calm, warm gaze. Dad, Liam said, this is Sophia. She brought you something. Liam carefully handed over the photo. His fingers trembled. Where did you find this? He asked softly. In my mother's things, I replied. She kept it her whole life. The old man sat down as if the ground had given way beneath him. His eyes darkened and I saw it wasn't just surprise. It was pain that had been waiting for decades. Her name was Clara, right? I nodded. David covered his eyes with his hand. My God, I thought she forgot about me long ago. And then I understood it wasn't just a photo. It was a love that had never truly ended. He was silent for a long time, then lifted his gaze. There are things I should have said many years ago, and maybe it's time now. Liam looked at me and then at his father. Something changed between us, subtly, but deeply. I didn't know where this would lead, but I felt the story was just beginning. David was silent for a long time. The room was quiet, only the old clock ticking, as if reminding him of every lost second. He sat on the couch, holding the photo, as if afraid it would vanish if he let go. It was a very long time ago. He finally began. 1986. Your mom and I met in college in Seattle. I was playing in a local band then, and he smiled gently. She had the kind of laugh that made you forget where you were standing. I froze. It was strange to hear someone talk about my mom. Not as a teacher, not as a mother, but as a woman who was loved. We were inseparable, he continued. We talked about everything. Books, movies, the future. I dreamed of opening a music studio. She dreamed of teaching. But then he lowered his gaze. I was offered a contract in Los Angeles. I hesitated, but she convinced me to go. She said, "You have to chase your dreams, even if they take you far away." And you separated? I asked quietly. Yes, but we wrote to each other every week. I planned to come back as soon as I signed the deal. But then one letter changed everything. He stood up, went to a cabinet and pulled out an old box wrapped with twine. Inside, dozens of envelopes yellowed with age. He carefully took one out, opened it and handed it to me. David, if you're reading this, it means our path is ending. Don't look for me. Sometimes love is also letting go. My mom's handwriting. No date, no explanation. She disappeared, he said quietly. I came back. I looked for her, but I was told she had left, changed her address. Then I learned she had gotten married. I didn't want to interfere with her life. But why did she? I trailed off. David sighed. I thought she didn't love me anymore. And then I found out she had a daughter. He looked at me. You? Felt like a shock had gone through me. You knew about me. I stood there unsure what to feel. Confusion, regret, a strange warmth. Liam sat nearby, silent, but his gaze spoke louder than words. There was surprise in it and something like sorrow. Dad, he said softly, you never told me this. There are things, son, that hurt even after decades. David turned to the window. The autumn wind rustled the curtains, and it seemed like time was finally breathing again. Maybe, he said, it wasn't a coincidence. You two met once, just like Clara and I did. And maybe now the story has a chance for a different ending. I looked at Liam. His eyes met mine. And in that look was everything. The memories that hurt and something new, tender, cautious. When we stepped outside, it was already getting dark. The air smelled like rain. Liam didn't speak until we reached the car. You know, he said, I never thought the past could speak so loudly. Sometimes it was just waiting for us to listen. I replied. We got in the car. I looked out the window where the shadows of the trees were reflected like the silhouettes of those who had loved long ago. When my mom was sick, she often repeated, not all stories have an ending. Some are just waiting to be finished. Maybe, Liam said, we are the ones who are supposed to do it. I smiled through my tears. Maybe. The next morning, I returned to my mom's trunk. At the very bottom, under a pile of old fabrics, I found another envelope, unopened, sealed, addressed to David. Inside was a short letter to David. I read the first line and my heart started racing. David, I couldn't forget you. It's just that everything didn't work out the way it was supposed to. Then if you're reading this, know that I loved you my whole life. I closed my eyes. My mom never sent that letter. But maybe now, years later, it would reach where it was meant to go. When I met Liam again that evening, he was standing by the lake where the sun was setting. We were silent for a long time. Then I gave him the letter, her last words. For your father. He read it. Then he looked at me long, intently. He whispered, do you know what this means? Yes. I took a step closer. That the story can start over. There was no past between us anymore. Only the present, warm and fragile like that sunset. The sun slowly disappeared below the horizon, leaving a soft golden glow over the lake. We stood in silence, listening to the water whisper against the shore, as if repeating what we were afraid to say out loud. Liam held my mom's letter in his hands, as if it weren't just paper, but a key to a past that had finally found its way to us. She loved him her whole life, he said quietly. And he loved her too. They both knew it, I replied. They just didn't get to say it in time. He looked up at me, warm, slightly bewildered. What about us? Will we be on time? The question hung in the air like the last ray of light before nightfall. I took a deep breath, as if trying to gather all the courage that had been missing before. I don't know, I said, but it seems this time I don't want to run away. Later that evening, we returned to David's. He looked peaceful, even happy. We sat down next to him. Do you regret the things happened the way they did? I asked. He smiled, looking out at the lake. No, because if we hadn't split up back then, you two wouldn't be here. And now I see it all made sense. Love doesn't die. It just changes faces. Liam was silent, but I felt his hand touch mine, as if confirming that this story was indeed continuing. The next day, Liam and I decided to go through his father's old workshop, a room where time had stood still. On the table were notebooks, sheet music, photos, and another box smaller, neatly tied with ribbon. Inside, pictures from his youth, cassette tapes, old letters. At the very bottom, a photo similar to the one I found with my mom. Only this time, Mom and David were together, young, smiling, happy. I froze. She was here? I whispered. Yeah. He flipped through an old calendar. Look here in the margins. Handwritten notes. Met Clara, August 1988. My mother never told me about that summer. She had supposedly gone away for language courses. I sat down holding the photo and felt a mix of pain and strange warmth in my chest. She had come back. She had found him after all. They saw each other. I whispered. Liam nodded. And maybe that's when she realized she couldn't stay. Maybe it was her goodbye. I looked at him. She was 27. Your dad was 30. And even so, they found each other even after everything. He smiled. Maybe it's not a coincidence that we found each other either. That evening, we sat by the lake again. It was colder but cozier. He wrapped me in his sweater, and there was nothing left between us. No time, no distance, no words that needed to be explained. Remember, he said, when we first met in the library, you were arguing with the professor about Hemingway, and you said I looked like some country wild child quoting quotes. I laughed. Yeah. And from that moment on, I couldn't forget you. I looked at his profile in the moonlight. Maybe we just weren't ready then. And now I sighed. Now I want the story of my mom and your dad to end not with pain but with us. He pulled me closer. The next week, we visited David again. He looked calm, even happy. We sat down next to him. Do you regret that things happened this way? I asked. He smiled, looking at the lake. No, because if we hadn't gone our separate ways, then you two wouldn't exist. And now I see it all made sense. Love doesn't die. It just changes faces.